OCO and greetings. Alito, Leslie, how are you?
Halito, Chimichukma.
All right. We are going to have my executive producer, Leslie Fry, to do a land acknowledgement. Thank you, Leslie. Go right ahead.
You're welcome. Let's pause for a moment to acknowledge the traditional stewards of the land that we reside on, and especially their ancestors, descendants, and all indigenous people who live now and had ever lived on this land that we call Turtle Island and beyond. But more than acknowledgement, let's honor and support our existing indigenous communities by helping them continue their land-based practices and traditions, way of life, by dispelling false narratives about their history while promoting their authentic truths, helping them heal from past wrongs and offenses, and assisting them in protecting and restoring back to health the land, nature, and water, which brings life.
Thank you so much, Leslie.
You're welcome.
We have two guests with us tonight. One is my good friend and compadre, Joe Gaines. Joe, how are you?
Doing good, Jay. Thank you for the invite.
Good to see you, bro. Good to see you.
Yes, sir.
And also we have Mr. or should I say Sir Kwame Sunhorse. Hey, Kwame.
Good evening, Jay, and thank you for the invitation and greetings to Leslie and Joe. As I sit here, and they acknowledge me that I sit here in the stolen lands of the Mississippi Creeks in Edenton, Georgia. I know that honoring the space which we occupy was occupied before us.
Absolutely.
Oh, man.
So, Leslie, what's on your mind tonight, sis?
Well, I had a wonderful little quick discussion with Brother Kwame today about this being the winter solstice and what is actually going on in the world right now because of this time when we're going to spend the longest night during the solstice. But it's also very important to us as indigenous people this particular time. So I'm going to kind of give it up to Brother Kwame or Elder Kwame to kind of speak on this and explain what this means. And then let's get into some other conversations this evening as well regarding that.
Okay, Kwame, you got the floor.
Well, thank us. And it's very important that we acknowledge the signs in the season. This sign of what's called the winter moon, and we just had the full moon. And then that moon having its energy, and we just had the alignment too of the four stars, the royal four stars, which is December 2nd to December the 4th, which is a portal, leading into this December 12th, that we are now celebrating these 9 days until December 21st, the winter solstice. And we look at our medicine wheel in our tradition, we have the four colors. We have the yellow, the east, the red, the south, the black, the west, the white, the north. And we have the seasons, the spring, the summer, the fall, the winter. And so we acknowledge this in our tradition by acknowledging that in the circle of life, because this is a time in which Ina Maka is allowed to rest, but it's also the sun's journey in that it travels across the equator and it stays there 3 days, and then it begins its journey back, coming back north. And so it's in that journey across that equator that what we call the longest night. And so in that longest night, it is journeyed across, or this is the part of what they created, this holiday that follows 3 days after December 21st, which is the 24th, leading into the 25th. And that is the holiday in which they acknowledge, but it's the alignment of the sun's natural journey. And so we as a people need to understand that we travel in different parts of the country, that at this time of the year, we wanted to be in a space that was able to provide us with the shelter from the winter, but also provide us with the necessary nutrients and food and resources that we could survive. And so we're now having this same challenge that we're now looking at how this time of the year creates what's called the seasonal affect disorder. And that's sad. And that's when people get what they call cabin fever and those type of things. And it's challenging for ones to be attempting to celebrate something, but also not being able to be in the sun and be out into the energy that will come spring and summer. So it's looking at how did our people ancestrally deal with this type of seasonal change. And it was very important because in the Mayan calendar, they also knew that they had counted the times around that we had gone around the Milky Way galaxy. We stay in an era 2,160 years. And we were coming into this last era of Pisces and Virgo, that 2,160 years. And they knew by the long count on the Mayan calendar, they knew by the count of the Chinese calendar, and they also knew by the count of the Kemetic calendar, the Egyptian calendar, that there was going to be a new year, a galactic year, a shifting of our 25,920 years around our Milky Way. And we have crossed that. And this is the 10-year anniversary of that crossing. And what we're now doing is that we are aligning in our galaxy after these 10 years of traveling on the other side of what's called the waters of Nu. And so these are the teachings that we knew the star knowledge from what we call the Dakotas.
Mm-hmm.
Like Golden Eagle was the keeper of the 52,000 years of star knowledge. We already knew, the Mayans knew, and they had the accurate count that on December 21st, 2012, or what Caliban came and he did another count after Jose Arguelles, and he said it was December 12th, 2012. And so we're sitting here now, we've just passed that, and we're going towards that December 21st, that longest night, because there's an energy that we're receiving from this part of the galaxy being in the photon belt, that we're now getting a consciousness and a shifting of energy of a new earth. And we're getting energies that is going to help activate us into the next evolution or the next stage of our development as human beings. And this is a very important time to be able to understand as above, so below. And this is something that our ancestors knew, because even the white buffalo calf woman was part of the Pleiades, that she came from the constellation, what was called the Seven Sisters.
Yeah.
So can I jump in right here, because I know that this is a really heady topic for some of our audience. When you talk about white buffalo woman being from the Pleiades actually is a group of people that come from a star system. Am I correct? That's what they believe. Yes, that they believe they came in. So this knowledge that we know about how the galaxy is this time of the year, what kind of energy is being presented this time of the year. And I actually looked at the program today. Actually, they did a meditation today during the day. Water right now is very significant too. This is a time when we need to replenish ourselves with water. They were saying that water is, that we must bless our water, and the energy that we put in the water, the blessings that when we put it in our being, that our body is 50% water, is what she was saying. That we really need to be mindful of what kind of food we eat during this time. The water content should be a little bit more. Actually, from historically, food, certain types of foods and stuff like that during the winter should be eaten during this time. And our ancestors knew that. The reason why our bodies are so out of alignment is because we're not eating within season. We're not eating the right kind of food within season. So this is such a heady conversation to have and such a deep conversation. You know, it is beyond anybody who believes in traditional religion per se, but you can't refute the fact that there is truth in all of this.
And I thank you for that, Leslie. And it's very important because that's why I started out the signs and the seasons, because these are the signs in which we have that we or the sun's journey to the south, and then it crosses the equator, and then it returns back. That's the order that we knew, that there's an order of nature, there's an order of the cosmos, there's an order of the universe. We are out of order. And the part you were sharing is most important is about the water, because water holds memory and consciousness. And so in the activation of our evolution now, we're being interfered with frequencies that are radiation waves. Radiation waves dehydrates the human being. And so if we're not really looking at how we're intaking water and foods and intaking the environment which we are in, this is why we're very pushing the overground railroad, creating oasis. Oasis is a place where there's vegetation and water that's provided. More so than being in an urban area, you're being in oasis, because you're coming back to Mother Nature, which is what I was sharing. The new frequencies of the new earth is really giving us this new consciousness of activation in the human body that we're needing to make this level of the fifth world what the Hopi says. Because understanding that it's raining here, so I know that this water that's falling is releasing memory and consciousness to go outside and breathe that air, is taking in that energy that water is brought from above, that is putting it into the environment that I'm living in. So it's very important how we balance, and this is something that our ancestors knew, how to move with the seasonal direction, just as our brothers do, the four-leggeds, the winged ones. They all know to move to certain environments for the season. And so what we are looking at is how do we become back to becoming balanced with living in that way. Yes, we've created urban areas, but urban only stands for you are banned from nature. You are BAN from nature. And being banned from nature, you're disconnected from your mother. So we're looking at people that are now orphans from nature. That's why they have in the DSM-4 and DSM-5 psychological evaluation for what's called nature deficit disorder. That we are now having mental illness from being disconnected from nature. So it's very important how we understand and how we become knowledgeable of getting ourselves back in order.
You're absolutely right. Brother Joe, are you still with us?
I think it's I would have to believe too that's not just here; it's around the whole world, like what we were talking about, and sacred places all over the world that has to be affected by that as well. I would think. Does that sound like I'm on the right track about that?
I really think you are. You know, go ahead, Leslie.
I was going to say that a friend of mine who used to she studied Ayurvedic medicine. She would tell me literally there are certain types of vegetables that you should not eat that are out of season, but because we consume in such mass quantity of things, we're eating the wrong things, and it's putting our bodies in dis-ease, which is causing disease. So because we're not adhering to the natural way of how our ancestors live, knowing when to move from one season to the next, where to go, what kind of food we needed to eat on our journey there, and then coming back, You know, this plays into a lot of what happens within our community overall. Just imagine, you know, being forced to march to Oklahoma, into a land that you don't even have
any knowledge of,
and trying to make that work for you, and you can't travel outside of Oklahoma, you know, and you wonder why our people are so sick, because we were people who migrated with the season. We knew to do that since ancient times, and now you're confined to one spot, unable to do the traditional things, to eat the traditional food. Yeah, it's a very deep complex.
Well, and that's an excellent point that you bring. But the part that we have done is that we have gotten complacent to where people are now going back and building, you know, neighborhood gardens. People are changing, you know, backyards into gardens, growing to where you grow what you need to sustain you from the environment that you're living in. Yes, there's a lot of people that can't because they're living in high-rise buildings and don't have the access to. But the thing that we're looking at is looking at the herbal medicines that our ancestors knew.
So I want to ask a question before we go into your explanation. Uh, I know that you all were considering doing a sweat during this time. Why is that important to do it during this solstice time?
Well, the solstice is doing this Inipe ceremony. Well, I don't want to hog it up. Jake can
no,
speak.
go ahead, Kwame, you want to roll?
Okay, well, the Inipe ceremony is one of detoxifying the body. And the part of us, how do we cleanse ourselves in order to help ourselves, is what the Inipe ceremony was created for. And being that it uses the four elements, it uses fire, water, earth, and air. And in it being built in the shape of a igloo or a dome, it's representative of what's called the womb of Mother Earth. And what we're doing is taking those four elements and creating that space in triple darkness when we come inside and close the door, and able to create and use that exchange of putting the pajuta or putting the waters of life onto those stones, which are the oldest record keepers on the planet. The stones are the oldest record keepers on the planet. And in them being able to keep those records of where we picked them up from, they're now being brought back to life by the fire. And in them being heated up until they began to glow, because that was the way in which they were formed from the inner earth. And then bringing them into that sacred space and putting them into that sacred whole, which represents the universe, and putting them into that, and then singing the songs and putting the sacred herbs on them, and then pouring the waters of life, creating what's called the grandfather's breath. And in that grandfather's breath, it begins to allow your largest organ, which is your skin, to release the toxins inside of your body. But also there's an exchange of the energy coming from the water, which I said earlier holds memory and consciousness. The oldest record keepers are releasing their energy by creating the steam from the water. So you have an exchange of your body detoxing and releasing all the negative in you, while you are absorbing the natural energy that comes from the water and the grandfathers. And then the breath and singing the songs and prayers, and being able to sit there in a fetal position with your root chakra connected to Mother Earth, with her energy coming up through you. And once that door opens, all of that you have prayed for and sung for and had from coming from your heart is being released in that grandfather's breath, and it's taken back up into the atmosphere and taken to Great Spirit. And so these are the rituals that we knew how to do in order to bring the cleansing that was necessary for us to go into each season and to each ceremony that we were looking at. Because when we look at the word spiritual, we look at in the word is the word ritual. And that is a very important, one of the 7 sacred rituals in which we were given by our ancestors. So it's important that we do. And the other part that you were talking, and I would ask people to look at, I think I've showed this before.
Yeah.
Right. And this is the book that tells you all of your plant relatives that are good for you. And the other part is that in the other side, we look at our ancestors on the African side, and that we're looking at the root foods, working with the root, working with the plants that comes from Mother Earth, because they're connected. And what they have is an excellent movie called Fantastic Fungi, which tells about the inner workings of the first internet, the inner workings of the microbial system that connects all of the plants on the planet together through a network of their own internet. And so we had this, and these standing talls that stand and bring down the energy and receives that which coming from the heavens comes down and then spins around in a circle. That's how you tell the tree's age. So these are the ceremonies of this season that's coming up. The winter solstice is part of a ritual that we have learned to honor.
Okay. I would like to interject something. And I understand everything that you said, Kwame, and it's all relative. What about the situation with the world today? With our young people out here committing murder, shooting everything in sight. And what about our young people that are not listening to their elders anymore? What do you have to say about that, Kwame? What do you have to say about that, Joe?
That's exactly right. That kind of goes back around to the winter solstice and about what that spirituality does and what that culture does and what the energy from the universe does to us and how it affects our ancestors. That we lost our way. And not just, I just don't want to harp on the youth, but also all of us. Youth, old, all of us, that we don't observe these things. The winter solstice is important for just one. That's one of the reasons why it's important that we acknowledge that and acknowledge that power that comes from the universe. And just like Kwame was saying, that the rocks came from the universe as well. They're not just the oldest living beings on this earth, but also within the universe. They carry that memory as well.
That's right. So we look at the things around us every day. We get these reports on the news and all of this other garbage. You're right. You're absolutely right, Joe, because the folks that claim to be in charge, the colonizers, they don't look at what we do other than a way to get rid of us. They have no healing. And that's the problem. Go ahead.
Can I say something about that? Mm-hmm. And getting back to what Brother Joe was saying, the fact is that we have to really respect everything as having life to it. We look at a rock as being inanimate. We look at it as not having any life in it. But even the Bible talks about the rocks having life. You know, there's a quote in the Bible that says, if you don't praise him, the rocks will cry out. The fact that the rocks themselves have a part in even praising the Creator speaks volumes about why we may look at these things. But I honestly feel some of the reasons why these things were taken from us and why Christianity was pressed on us so hard was because our connection was scary to colonizers. Our connections to the earth, our connections to the spiritual world, it was extremely scary to them. And it also wielded a certain type of power that they felt like if they didn't breed it out of us and take it out of us, that we would have power over them. You think about the deepness and the depth of who we are as people to this earth that are tied to this land and the appropriation that goes on by the colonizers who have no connection whatsoever, but they have to appropriate it from us. So I believe that it was so terrifying to them to see this, so terrifying for us to be awakened. And if we do see it being awakened now, it's like it's something new, like it's new agey and stuff like this. No, this stuff has been going on for centuries. We've always known about it, but like Brother Joe said, we lost our way. We lost our connection to the earth. We lost our connection to the land. And as a result of it, it put us in a situation where we're dying quicker. We have diseases that, come out of nowhere. These are all things because we are no longer in alignment with the land that we were given.
That's true. That's very true. But then, you got to stop and look at the history of how all of this started over here on this side of the Atlantic Ocean. They didn't come here for peace or to help anybody. They came here because they wanted what we had. And that was the peace and the tranquility that we had in just our cultures. And I'm talking about over 1,200 different cultures. And when they came here, they tried to kill all of us and take what we had from us. What do you say about that, KWAME?
Well, and you're very much on point, Jay. And the part of the invaders coming here was because they were using the knowledge of ones that had already been here and had returned back to the land in which they stole them from. And so the part for what was being done was that they were in an environment that was cold and did not have much to offer. They had very little resources. And so what they began is to wander about the earth and looking at those civilizations that were bountiful and plentiful, because you tell the greatness of a nation by three things. Number one is the land. Number two is by the water. Number three is by the women. Because if you have land, water, and women, you have a great nation. And the part of it is that they lacked those in the environment that they were coming from. And when they came in, they began to intermingle with the women and reproduce, because they knew that they did not have the weaponry yet to fight the men that were having the nation that they were coming into. And so in them coming in and marrying the women and coming into getting into those nations, they began to say that, you can't kill me because I got your grandchildren. So that was their way of manipulating, and began to what they call this today.
Racism.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Interestingly enough, they not only did it here, they also did it in Ireland, to the Celts, and any place where there were indigenous people.
Right. It was on the planet, because they were in a part of the planet in the Caucasus Mountains where they were, which that Ireland was plentiful in grain. The continent was plentiful in grain. The West Indies were plentiful in grain. And so all of these places were more productive for the people there. And then once they got there, that was their way of getting into that, because then they created a system of what they call politics, or what they now call today is necropolitics. You know what the word necro means?
Yeah.
And that's what they began their system with, racism and necropolitics. They began to create what they was looking at doing was gender genocide.
Yeah.
They were looking at how to demasculate the males, and then to create the genocidal process of eliminating the people of these nations. Because I was sharing with us about the trying to wait for the screen to come, but sharing about the population and brown is the new white is because looking at today, I'll just read it off of the little screen, that every 7 seconds there is.
Come on, Kwame.
Okay. I was trying to get this to show. But anyway, the population is happening here on Turtle Island. Every day there are over 12,000 children born. And what do we say in our culture as to what we think and what we say is for what?
Our children.
The next seven
next 7 generations.
7 generations. Now, what we're having here on Turtle Island, that we people of color are producing 7,000 people a day to their 1,000. And that right there scares them, because that means is that they're losing control in population that symbolizes their superiority of white. Mm-hmm. And the thing of it is, they never have been the superior on the planet, because there are more people of color than there are people of absence of color.
Well, this explains so many things. It explains the storming on the White House. It explains the murder of people of color in this country. They see that they're losing control, and so therefore, they're operating on fear, and fear, violence, and brutality is the result of people feeling like they're losing their control.
Right.
And this also plays into how we vote, how adamant everybody was to vote for a particular politician, because they felt by putting a certain type of politician into power, that was their agenda would still be met. But this is why there's aggressiveness is going on in this country today.
And it's very important that you just brought that to attention, because the thing that they're looking at, this country was founded for white Anglo-Saxon men.
The white gentry.
Right. And it was not for white women, was not for black men, wasn't for red men. It was for white Anglo-Saxon men. 2 different parties, the Southern Crats and the Northern Crats. And they too has been fighting, because this is where they came up with the politics. But the politics began to change after the war, and then we began to get rights and being able to have rights to vote. That meant that they had to be challenged, and saying that these people, just as John Wilkes Booth said when he heard Lincoln after the surrender of Maddox, that they did surrender in the Civil War, and he said that he was freeing the black people, he said that the N-word citizenship will not happen. I'm going to stop this. And he killed Lincoln. It's because they will not want to be challenged by them. They'll fight with each other as they did there at the Capitol, but they do not want to lose that power of whiteness. Mm-hmm. And the challenge for them is to look at racism or white supremacy or democracy. But we were not a democracy. We were a confederacy. They were attempting to copy what we had a balance, because we were a matriarchal people. Matriarchal, not patriarchal. Uh-huh. And that is their downfall.
Well, that is exactly why they suppress their women and their culture and do such things. Women have such a low level of worth within Anglo-Saxon history. Women were chattel. Women were considered a possession, which was never the case with us as indigenous people everywhere. And this is indigenous. Let me just say this. This is something, the truth that has run through any indigenous nation, not only those of us here on Turtle Island, but also in Africa and in other places where indigeneity, where we have original people.
And their women to them were property, period.
Right.
Right. Because they lacked, remember I said, land, water, and women. They lacked women. Why were they going around hitting each other over the head, dragging off a woman from another person's cave to another man's cave? They were fighting over women. We had plentiful of women. We had plenty of land to create economics, because land is the basis of all economics on this earth. You can't have any economics without land. Go ahead, Jay.
let's give Joe Gaines a chance to say something.
Sorry.
Yeah,
I apologize.
That's exactly right. The reason, another part of the reason that they came over here and stayed over here and did what they did is about control. That's certainly right. It's also about greed for money.
Power.
Yeah, exactly right. And well, yeah, money is power, and power controls. And that's in Jack Weatherford's book called Indian Givers. He recognizes that the Americas, specifically Central and South America, financed the European Renaissance, sending boatloads, shiploads of gold and silver upon the death and slavery of indigenous people. So that's still in their mind today. I mean, that's just like and that's part of their culture, just like we have our culture. They have their culture. That's what runs through their DNA is power and greed, control.
Yeah. People think that racism is what is driving the friction between us here, but it has always been about land and having. Remember, before race became a thing, before it was a new concept, because race is a new construct, it was just people who had property and those who did not. But the thing is that people who did not have property were outnumbering those who did. So they had to figure out a caste system in which this would work for them to always be in power. So first it became you own property or you didn't. Then it became color. But it is never really about color, you all. It's always about land and money and property. That is what it's always about. Now, while we're sitting here fighting over color and who is this and the fact that we have to identify with a certain category, they are now still making money and still getting more land, extracting from our land and making more money. Because we're here fighting over the menial things, they're doing all this from behind the scenes.
Yep. And Jay, that guy goes back to your question about how do we help the younger generation to overcome these things? And that's like Kwame was saying, that adults, we have to educate ourselves. Yeah. Educate ourselves on the issues, educate ourselves even in politics, and with our own spirituality, with our own culture, with our own traditions. Learn these things, learn about our ceremonies. This is what we do it, and not just what we do it, but why we do it.
Can I ask you something, Brother Joe?
Yes.
Both Joe and I are Choctaw, but we see this new form of indigeneity producing itself now, where people are a little bit more sophisticated. We're not traditionalists anymore. We've conformed to a lot of ways. How hard is it for us to teach our children then when we're sending them to colonial schools, we're sending them to places where they're learning and a history that's not truly our own? How hard is it to get our people to come back to our traditional ways? Because in a way, we're losing that. Even our language, even the Choctaw language, they've opened up their school for people to learn the language because nobody wants to learn the language. They're marrying outside of the nation. Mm-hmm. These are things that we struggle with as people who are indigenous that have conformed to a colonistic mindset. I pose this question to both you and Elder Kwame and Elder Nightwolf.
Well, I got to tell you something. This whole thing has been going on for over 600 years. There were 112 million of us here in what is known as the United States. But by the time 1934 rolled around, they had killed, murdered, or diseased us to death to a little more than just 1 million people. It was systemic. It was systematic the way they did it. They knew as long as they had our voices, they know that as long as they had to come up against our resistance, nothing was going to change. So when they start eliminating us, they go into a village with these blankets infected with smallpox, and you kill off a whole village in a matter of days. So they understood what to do. It's just now they're at a point they don't know what to do anymore.
But how we get back to ourselves? How do we get back to our traditions when we've conformed so much to colonistic mindset?
You got Indian chiefs, leaders of nations now that are all operating because of money. The casinos. Indians don't own those casinos. Those casinos are owned by Malaysians and people from over there in Asia. So when you cut off your money source, you cut off your power.
Could I add to that? And all of us are correct in how we are seeing what is going on. But the part of it is the destruction of a nation begins in the home. It begins in the home, because in you coming into that home and doing the things that you do to those women and to those children. And this is why the missionary school was so important, because destroy the child before it becomes the man. See, it's easier to fix a broken child than it is a broken adult. By the time that those children return back to those reservations and return back, they were broken. They were traumatized, and they would grow into the adults that would raise another generation of traumatized people. And so what we're looking at in this part of this traumatizing environment that they created, the part of it is how do we begin to heal these traumas? We have intergenerational trauma, epigenetics that is in the DNA of our grandparents, our parents. And what we're doing is how do we reprogram that? As brothers, we have to look at this. Brother, when I did this retreat in Texas a couple of weeks ago, the brother came up with an acronym for brothers. It says to be real, open, truthful, helping everybody rise spiritually. We have to begin to change our language, because Lina we Nila, I am Shawnee, Jay is Lakota, Choctaw. The thing that you do that the Choctaw said, and Mountain Eagle woman and her daughter, Mama Walks on Water, Omia's mother, Jay, told us that the Choctaw prophecy was the children of two shields will come back together, the red and the black, on Turtle Island, and we will begin to use the spiritual shield to fight what we're talking about right now. Because we attempted with our warrior shield, and as Jay said, we were genocidally almost wiped out, only 1 million left. So we have to begin to fight from the spiritual. Wakantanka can do great battles, and we know that we do great ceremonies in prayers, in lodges, in the Sundance.
Right. Joe, I see T is in the room. Hello, T. Do you have something to say about what we're talking about?
Oh yes, T.
Well, yeah. Don't put me on camera though. But Jay, yes, I just heard this conversation, and the Choctaw woman on she was talking about how do we get back to our old ways? How do we reclaim? Well, I just want to bring up the point about Gary Batten, the chief of the Choctaw Nation, and the difficulty of returning to our ways when the Choctaw chief is attending a Kansas City football franchise game and he is banging on the drum while everybody tomahawk chops. So he is doing a colonized behavior. So it's very difficult to teach your children when the leader of your tribe has become the token chief.
There you go. There you go.
I mean, so that is really a problem. So I think you need to call out leadership. It's hard when it's your husband's chief, but I called him out. And I think the whole Choctaw Nation needs to call him out.
And the same thing happened just this week up in the Wampanoag territory. Their chief, who's the youngest chief, was involved in a crime. So, it's not like it's all being done by them to us. We've become so colonized that we're doing the same things that they're doing.
Absolutely.
Against their own people.
Yeah, he was harming his own people. And the Choctaw Nation speaks out on missing and murdered Indigenous women, how horrible it is, how awful it is. Well, doesn't Chief Batten realize that one causes the other? He is causing that to happen.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is.
So I just wanted to call him out tonight. Thank you, Jay. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, T.
We appreciate you too.
And that's what going back to what we as individuals need to say and how to do, how to express ourselves. Michael Yellowbird, he was a professor at Haskell University about 20, 30 years ago, and he came out with a pretty good book about decolonizing ourselves for Indigenous eyes only, called Indigenous Eyes Only. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of almost like a little textbook kind of thing, because it gives you samples and say, okay, hold the community event and do this, and to get people to do this, and then you yourself do this and that. It's kind of like it is kind of like a little textbook thing of how we begin to decolonize ourselves and start seeing the myths for what they are. Mm-hmm. And that's just one thing what my wife was talking about, T, was that recognizing what Batten did. And okay, why did he do that? Mm-hmm. That's a good question. We can all surmise this or that. Okay, why did he do that? And now, but we can project the results of what he done. We can project that based upon the past. What that does is that lends to non-native people. When a tribal member gets up, it's bad enough anybody does it, much less a tribal member. It build it too. They juice it up. It's the third largest tribe in the United States with Chief Gary Batten of the Choctaw Nation, and the crowd's screaming and everything. And he's running around like that. Our people see that and think that's the way we're supposed to act. But what about the other people? What about the white people? They see that. They see natives still as less than human. We're subhuman to them, and that's how they came over here and did what they did to us and every race, really. But we'll just talk about Turtle Island for now. Because they created within their own mindset that these people that are here, these Indians, they're less than human because they're heathen. First off, they're heathens because God said anybody does the Bible. The Bible. I better speak correctly about that. The Bible said, anybody, the Old Testament, anybody that doesn't pray to God is a heathen, and therefore you can go ahead and kill them and still get into heaven.
Yeah, right. And even the Mormons continue to say that I will allow a black person or a native person or a person of color in the heaven if you serve me when you get to heaven.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Listen.
Yeah.
I have to talk about Chief. There was a council that agreed for him to do that. He didn't do that on his own. So now, speaking to him, running around the stadium like some mascot, but a council approved that. The Choctaw Nation, a council, because there are people that, he's not part of, he's governed with people who counsel him, and they agreed to that. My question is, what did they agree to? Is it a sum of money? Because it totally just misrepresented us to have him doing something like that, which is why I talked about us losing our way. We have completely lost our way. We lost our way the minute we marched to Oklahoma and decided that we were going to be what we were going to be in Oklahoma. There were some of us that stayed in Mississippi and said, I'm not going to do that. But we've completely lost our way. For him to do something like that, or for that answer, the chief of the Cree Nation giving the Pope a headdress. This is like, but why?
Why?
Is money more important than the past?
or
or the future.
Or the future, exactly.
Right. KWAME, we need you to help us out and weigh in.
Yeah, because we only got what?
We've got about 4 minutes.
4 minutes.
Hey,
and don't take the whole 4 minutes, Kwame.
Oh no, I'm only take 3.5. I'll leave you 2 seconds. But anyway, it's very important that we understand, you know, there was a council, but is there a council of elders knowing the etiquette? Yes, you can have a council. They're all paid servants.
Yeah.
There you go.
So they're going to agree to keep that payment coming.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that we got to look at is how did we do more with less?
Yeah.
How did we do more with less? Because, you know, the Franco Wars that was fought in Africa, and there was a psychiatrist named Frantz Fanon, and he wrote this book.
Yeah, I got that book. I had to study that. Yeah.
Right. You have to study this. If you study in any psychology, you have to study this. Black skin, white mask.
Mm-hmm.
No, come today, you got the council, you've got this today.
Red skin, white mask.
Same mental.
Wow.
But
I love how you could pull these books up.
Yeah.
References. That's awesome.
Because what you're looking at is what? We have to learn how to heal the soul trauma. And this was written by
Eduardo
Duran,
mm-hmm.
psychologist.
Well, let me tell you this before you go any further. If you all want to get any information on what we're talking about, one of the books you should read is by Dr. Jack D. Forbes. It's called Indians, God is Red. God is Red. And
go get it.
Yeah, go get it, you know, because Jack D. Forbes was a good friend of mine until he passed away. Jack D. Forbes was responsible for writing the proposal for the first Native American university in America, DQ University in California, part of the California, I forget what it is, but just look up DQ University. That was a great man.
Well, I truly love these fireside chats that we have because I learned so much from these fireside chats, just having these conversations. You know, I really want to get into indigeneity in our next, you know, what denotes indigeneity today, what it denotes being native today in America in our next fireside chat if we get a chance. But this has been very, very, very informative. And I learn something new every time we have one of these discussions.
Absolutely. Thank you
so much. Jay.
That's one of them.
Vine Deloria Jr.
Yeah, but Vine Deloria, he was another great man. His son ain't nothing like him, though. What a disappointment. Oh, yeah, and Shonda Buchanan, she's a very close friend of mine.
Yeah, Shonda, yeah.
Right.
So I know we're closing the show out, but Leslie, I want to thank you for giving us an opportunity to talk tonight. And I want to thank you too, Kwame. You know, you talk all the time. I love you. Joe Gaines, you know I love you, bro.
Okay.
And so, Leslie, you can close it out.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. Thank you for making our season 2022 a huge success. We will ask you to please like, subscribe, ding the bell on YouTube, and share our content. We're trying to get over 1,000 subscribers. This is really good content, and we have elders here, people who are traditionalists in our community who are teaching us things. So please support this community by tuning into this content, tuning into Elder Nightwolf's radio show, to the YouTube channel. We promise that we'll have more content like this in the future, more conversations such as this. But we want to wish all of you all a peaceful, restful holiday season, whatever you celebrate. Please stay careful. This is a very strange energy that we're living in this world today, you all. So be mindful of those things. Put on your spiritual eyes and look, you know, watch for those things. Yes.
I want to ask everybody that looks at this broadcast, to please keep me in prayer.
That's what I was going to say next.
Okay, you go ahead and do it, Leslie. Go ahead.
Well, one of the reasons why we are taking a little hiatus is Elder is going to be having some surgery. He's having some heart surgery. So we ask that you lift him up, say your prayers for him, keep him in your thoughts, send good energy, healing energy his way. But he will be back on January the 12th, bright as new, with a new heart and everything. So, yeah. I don't know if it's going to change his bad ways, but he'll have a new heart.
No, it's a heart change. It's not bad ways change.
No. but we ask that you all please send him good well wishes. We'll keep you posted on the Winter Nightwolf Productions channel and on the Cliff Dive Productions channel, just to kind of give you a little bit more information on his progress. Or he might do it himself, depending on how he's doing.
Yeah. I want to thank all of you tonight, all of you that are watching and all of you that are part of this. I love you all of you. I love even those that make it almost impossible to love. I love you in spite of yourselves. So I'll close out with the words in Cherokee. Danada, go ai, wado. Until I see you again, I'm Jay Winter Nightwolf, along with my brothers and sisters.
What's that?
Awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Yakoki.